archons who were elected annually, and thus because both parts of the Athens government had leaders who were elected. So democracy actually is the birthplace of this particular area, Athens, जहाँ पे वो people used to decide about their future. People used to make laws according to their own thinking. Spartan life was simple. The focus was on the obedience and war. Slavery made this possible by freeing the young men from household and industrial duties and allowing them to focus on their military duties. So that's why they had great soldiers. Young boys were trained to be warriors. Young girls were trained to be mothers of the warriors. So basically, there was a system which was there, and they had a strong, one of the strongest militaries at that time. Athenians' life was creative wonderland. As an Athenian, you could get a good education and could pursue any of several kind of arts or sciences. So you'll find Socrates, you will find Plato, you'll find all these great scholars, and these people were there. You could serve in the army or navy, but you didn't have to. This applied only to boys. However, girls were restricted to other pursuits, not war or business or education. So basically, they used to manage the household. For many years, Spartan armies provided much of the defense of the Greek lands because of their strong military force. The Spartan heroism at the Battle of Thermopylae during the Persian War was it is known to everyone. Inspired all the Greeks to fight back with all their might against the invading Persians. Athenians and Spartans fought side by side in the Battle of Plataea, which ended Persian invasions of Greece. So basically, Persian Empire wanted to overrun this particular area, and because of their collective efforts and their alliances, their strong military forces, they could manage to win against the Persians. And this is the concept the other states, other empires derived, that you have forged alliances to win against superior enemies. And the same concept is being applied in modern times as well. That's why the countries in modern times, international relations, they forge alliances. Like, for example, India, Pakistan. Pakistan is allying itself with the Chinese. India is allying itself with the US, Israel, and many other superior kings like European countries. So the concept is applying on the modern times. One way that Athens and Sparta really differed was in their idea of getting along with the rest of the Greece. Sparta seemed content to keep itself and provide army and assistance when necessary. Athens, on the other hand, wanted to control more and more of the land around them. So basically, they wanted to colonize other city-states. This eventually led to a war between all the Greeks. So they used to fight, and this was the Peloponnesian War, in which the all Greeks fought against each other, and which proved to be disastrous for them. And ultimately, Alexander the Great got the benefit of it. After many years of hard fighting, Sparta won the war because of their superior military. In true Greek spirit, Sparta refused to burn the city of Athens. Rather, the culture and spirit of the Athens was allowed to live on, as as long as the Athenians no longer desired to rule their fellow Greeks. In this way, the influence of Athens remained and grew stronger slowly and gradually. Other cities, city-states had the same kind of temples, buildings, and meeting places, but it was Athens that became most famous. Why? Because of their great philosophers who were born there and who worked there. The Persian Wars, early wars, would also give you an idea of evolution of international relations, that how they fought against each other and how they fought against the Persian Empire. Conflict between the Greek city-states and the Persian Empire was probably inevitable. Why? Because they were too big and too close together, and also too ambitious to not have clashed. In 499 BC, they clashed. For several decades leading up to this clash, Greeks had settled in Asia Minor on the western coast. So they had, their colonies there in the Asia Minor. The Persians then conquered these colonies and added them to the empire. तो वहां से clash इनका शुरू हुआ. The Greeks living in these colonies were used to having their own government of elected officials. Athens was the birthplace of democracy, and they soon revolted against the Persians. तो उनका क्योंकि बैकग्राउंड वही था सारा, तो they revolted against the Persians, जिसकी वजह से जो पर्शियन एम्पायर था उसको गुस्सा चढ़ा और उसने कहा यार ये तो हमारे मुल्क के अंदर दे आर क्रिएटिंग रिवोल्ट। तो उन्होंने फिर एथेंस पे हमला करने की या ग्रीस पे हमला करने की सोची। So this was the beginning of actually the Persian Wars. Even with Athens' help, the colonies didn't hold out long against the much larger and stronger Persian army. So Darius was the king of Persian army at that time. और उसका बेटा बाद में Xerxes, they led this war against the Greeks. The first war, the Battle of Marathon, and when the revolt was crushed, Persian Empire Darius wanted to punish Athens for aiding the Asia Minor colonies. A few years later, when his army was trained and ready, Darius led his troops on an invasion of Greece. They sailed to the Bay of Marathon, where one of the most famous battles of all time took place, the Battle of Marathon. Athens had appealed to Sparta for reinforcements, but the messenger had returned with the message that Spartan troops wouldn't arrive for 9 days because they were in the middle of religious festivals. So Marathon was very close to Athens itself. तो पहले लाजमी बात है हमला इन्हीं पे होना था. Other city-states were jealous of Athens' growing power and had not sent troops either. So Athens was on its own. On paper, it was a mismatch. Persian troops numbered about 100,000. Athenian troops numbered about 20,000. How could Athens hope to win against such overwhelming odds? The victory was due more to surprise and discipline than anything else. So Athenians were very much disciplined, and they worked. They were very, they achieved surprise against the Persian Empire. The well-trained Athenian soldiers did not break formations as they suddenly charged the Persian lines. जब उन्होंने हमला किया तो उन्होंने अपनी formations के तहत किया. And same you can learn in modern military forces. Whenever they fight in their lines. In the face of such a determined charge, Persian soldiers broke ranks and ran and were slaughtered from behind. So it was an early defeat for the Persian Empire. The Persians were expecting individual hand-to-hand fighting. The Athenians gave them a mass united charge. The sheer weight of the charge must have been astounding, and the Persian force was large but scattered and poorly organized, and that was the reason that they faced, a defeat. The Athenian force was not intimidated by the large numbers of their opponents. They almost literally drove their opponents into the sea. So this was the idea which you can derive from the past, that even your enemy is superior. If you have got better training, better, if you are highly motivated, you can defeat your enemy. And same concept is being applied in modern times as well. In the Battle of Marathon, the Persians counted 6,400 dead soldiers and many more captured. The Athenian dead were not more than 192. And even though the Persians still barely outnumbered the Athenians, Darius turned for home, convinced that he was beaten. In 480, 10 years after the disastrous defeat at Marathon, the Persians were back, and this time even with more men. They met a combined force of Greeks at Thermopylae, a small mountainous pass that controlled access to most of the rest of the Greece. A group of 7,000 soldiers easily held off the Persians for 2 days almost. But the Greeks traitor showed the Persians a secret passageway that allowed them to strike the Greek army from the rear. अच्छा, ये जो पास था ये एक नैरो कॉरिडोर था, हॉट गेट से इसको कहते थे. यहाँ पे जो स्पार्टन फौज थी, 300 स्पार्टन्स और उसके अलावा कुछ एथेनियंस थे, उन्होंने मिलके तकरीबन 7,000 के करीब लोगों ने पर्शियन पूरी की पूरी आर्मी को यहाँ पर रोके रखा काफी दिनों तक. और उसके बाद एक ग्रीक जो ट्रेटर था उसने वो रास्ता दिखाया और उसके बाद दे वर डिफीटेड. Seeing this, most of the defenders retreated. A group of 300 Spartans stayed on the battlefield, fighting to the death and covering their fellow Greek retreat. This heroic act allowed the rest of the Greek army, which was made up of soldiers from all over Greece, to escape captured or certain death. Following the success at Thermopylae, the Persian army poured into mainland Greek and wreaked havoc, including burning Athens to the ground. तो एथेंस को उन्होंने जला के राख कर दिया, क्योंकि थर्मोपाइल की वो जो विक्ट्री थी ऑलरेडी उनको बहुत ज़्यादा उसका फायदा पहुंचा. The people and army of Athens, however, had escaped to island of Salamis in ships that far-sighted generals had insisted on building several years before. The Persian fleet followed the retreating Greeks to Salamis, where another surprise awaited. With the Persian Emperor Xerxes watching on his throne from high up on a mountain top overlooking the Bay of Salamis, the Greek ships first sailed away from shore, pretending to flee the island, then turned around quickly and began ramming the large, slower moving, more difficult to maneuver Persian ships. तो पहले वो भागने की उन्होंने शो किया, उसके बाद उन्होंने वापस मुड़ के स्पीड के साथ उनके जो बड़े जहाज थे उनको उन्होंने मारना शुरू कर दिया, जिसकी वजह से वो डूबने लग गए. Before Xerxes knew what had hit them, half his fleet was on the ocean floor. In frustration, as great as his father's 10 years earlier, Xerxes led his army back home. और फिर वो वापस आ गया. Despite the Greeks' smashing victory at Salamis, the fighting was not over. The very next year, the Persians and Greeks clashed again, and this time the result had a more lasting effect. For the first time in the war, the Greeks, Persians had a more equal troop number क्योंकि सारे Greeks मिल गए थे. Also, Spartan and Athenian fought side by side. In the Battle of Plataea, the Greeks again proved their military superiority, and the Persians retreated for good. और वो वापस हो गए. First and foremost, how the Greeks won these battles. They had an inherent advantage of defender. So when you are defending your country, you are, at advantageous position. You are not, going to offense, and you are on the defense. And this is what you have seen in the modern times. When the Americans came to Afghanistan, when you saw that Americans came to Iraq, they were invaders. They were actually came for the offense. But the other party, guerrilla war, fighters, they were on the defense, and you saw that Americans had to retreat from Afghanistan and Iraq. They were fighting to protect their homes and their way of life. And history is full of examples like this of group of people willing to die to the last man to defend their homeland. So when you are attacked, automatically your motivation would be high. 65 की जंग में आपने देखा पाकिस्तान ने किस तरह से डिफेंड किया था. I think this is going to end now. This is the last 1 minute. And I know this is a bit boring lecture, but the problem is you need to understand this history in order to understand the evolution of international